Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Interviewing Wednesdays. We're very glad you're with us today. It is September 15th, 2021. For those on Zoom, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, please just put your questions into the chat box. And for those watching on Facebook, please just enter your questions into the comments field. Please note this event is being recorded. It's currently live on Facebook. The recording will be on the Career DFW Facebook page and the Career USA YouTube channel for others to view in the future. By participating in this event, and if you have your microphone or camera on, you give consent for your name and picture to appear. Please note that any comments you put in the Zoom chat window do not appear in the recording. Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jeff Morris. Back in 2008, I started a website called careerdfw.org to help those who are unemployed in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. In 2012, I started a second website, careerusa.org, to help people around the USA. I have written a book called What I've Learned About Your Job Search That You May Not Know. It is available on Amazon. Since 2007, I've been facilitating and leading the North Dallas Plano Career Focus Group. The group's been around since the late 1990s. I took it over in 2007, and I'll tell you about our upcoming program that we have this Friday at the end of this session. And since 2017, I've been a member of the practice interview team, and you'll hear more about the practice interview team in just a second. Well, when we started this, I asked the two people I know who know all about interviewing and what they could do to put together a presentation for us. So Mark and Walt got together. They came up with a 13-part workshop, 20 hours of material. This is the fourth or fifth time we've now run through it. Today's recording is pre-recorded, so it is from the last session. I took out stuff that didn't fit in the session. So we'll be playing the recording, and at the very end of the session, any questions anybody has, I'll be glad to answer those questions for you at the very end. So here we go.
All right, yeah, Mark McDonald. My journey to this point included 3 layoffs. I was in the telecommunications equipment market, mostly in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Amazing thing, amazing fact, every company I've ever worked for no longer exists. Some of them went out of business, some of them were sold to somebody else. But if I gave a 30-year-old my resume, they would not recognize any of the names. And so I guess that's how a career comes to an end. And mine ended officially in May of 2018 when I retired, but I had a long run. And the last 8 years, I've been involved with the pit crew and leading it and offering practice interviews. And so that's kind of my short story. The pit crew meets any day of the week now, and so it's all done virtually. And I'll just cover this briefly, and if there's time at the end, I'll cover a little bit more. But we do what we say. We give you practice interviews. The interviews are given by professionals. We've all been hiring managers as part of our professional responsibilities, and so that's my group of volunteers. They give the interviews. We work off a job description and your resume, so it's very personalized and customized to you. The interviews take about 45 minutes. The whole session is about an hour and 15 minutes. So that's how much time you need to set aside. We record it, and it's absolutely free. So when you're ready to have a practice interview, and I encourage you to practice early and practice often in your job search, then send it to dallaspitcrew@gmail.com. That's the best way to reach me and the best way to schedule your practice interview. Some people contact me through LinkedIn, and that's great, but I'm just going to say, send your information to dallaspitcrew@gmail.com, and we'll go from there. It takes a couple of days to set up, sometimes 3 days, most of the time 2 days. So I'll need to know when you're available 2 business days from the day you submit. So if you submitted today, we'd be looking at Friday or Monday as a backup. So that's how much lead time the pit crew needs. And I encourage you, again, practice early, practice often. Also encourage you to link in with me. Oh, I got out of order. Okay, there we go. I also encourage you to link in with me and just send me a note that said we met on Interview Wednesday, and that's good enough for me. I just want to know that that we actually had an interaction. And so I'll add you to my network, and of course that'll help with the target companies and finding contacts inside companies that you're interested in. And then the one I skipped here was, besides the two-way practice interviews, We also offer a one-way interview using some technology that's been donated to Jeff, which is the Easy Hire one-way interview tool. So I'll give you the questions in advance, and this is pretty much automated. So once we engage and you tell me you request the interview, I'll send you the questions, and then you can engage the tool, and it'll be recorded, a one-way interview, and then the interview will be forwarded to you. The recording will be forwarded to you, and I'm pretty much not involved in that. So nobody sees that practice, one-way practice, except for you and anybody you choose to share it with. But I'd encourage you to do this if you are anticipating a one-way interview, because, you know, right now it's kind of strange just talking to the camera, but I know there's other people on the other end and I can see your reactions. But with a one-way interview, there's none of that. There's no feedback at all. It's a very surreal experience to actually do it. So practice it if, you know, it'd be another good thing to practice, and just takes a little bit of time. You get 3 minutes for each question. So the longest your video is going to be is 12 minutes. There's 4 questions in this one-way interview that the Pit Crew offers. And then finally, I do one other thing, and I only announce this on Wednesdays. So those of you who come to Interview Wednesday get to hear that I also coach. And I coach on one question: why did you leave your last job? And so we're going to be talking about that today, and I'll be introducing what I do and how I do it. But if you have a complicated departure situation, then you ought to spend some time with a coach. And that's the one thing that I coach on, is how to answer that question. Why did you leave your last position? Or it may be a position prior to that, but we go over how to answer that question initially, and then also any follow-up questions that are generated by your situation. So we storyboard the whole story that you're going to tell about why you left that position. And reach out to me at dallaspitcrew@gmail.com if you'd like some coaching, if you'd like a one-way interview, or if you'd like to set up a two-way interview. It's all the same, dallaspitcrew@gmail.com. Thanks.
So what do I do? Well, my background is information technology, more years than I want to confess. But inside of that, I used to help in leadership development and in training. And part of that was in interviewing. And we actually taught the behavioral event interviewing, you know, back in the 80s. But the idea was to get a better handle on hiring people, because we weren't really doing a good job. And the manager was totally responsible for hiring back then. You got to get the assistance of background checks and HR and things like that. But the manager was responsible for making that decision. And then I got laid off after 25 years, downsized, and I went to an interview and sat on the other side of the desk and made an F- on my first interview. So I put together a workshop that I call the Interview Success Workshop. So how you sit on this side of the table as a candidate. And it actually does 2 things. The primary function is to differentiate yourself, and primary function 2, I guess you can't have 2 primaries, is how do you sell yourself? And that's selling who you are, what you do, and how you can help. So the workshop is very fundamentally designed for categories of questions and options and strategies and structures and things to handle those type of questions. It includes a video of your interview. They're fairly short. They average about 15 to 17 minutes. You get a question from each category. You interview each other online. I take notes, and then we go through and review and coach and give suggestions and ideas for how we can improve. Very, very informal. Send me a note on my Yahoo email address. Look me up on LinkedIn for the details. It's a free workshop, and I also do the Easy Hire. You can go through the 11 questions on Easy Hire as well through Jeff's getting us a license copy so that we can use that. But I can offer you that too. So you can come. And so not only do you learn these options and things, but you also learn what to prepare and how to prepare some of these things in advance, because you can prepare lots of content in advance. So that's kind of what we focus on. Come to the workshop, come back again, practice those fundamentals. Then you can go to the Pit Crew and say, okay, I know what I need to do now. I know how to prepare. I'm getting ready. And then you can hit the Pit Crew. So heartily recommend that you do both. If you can sign up with me, I can tell you this, we'll have some learning without squirming.
Thank you very much, Walt. All right, well, today is session number 7, how to discuss compensation in an interview and why did you leave your last job? So gentlemen, it's all yours.
All right, let's get going. If I can get it to work. Come on, you can do it. There we go. I think I skipped one. All right, so okay, let's start off with the pit crew topics. We're on number 7 today, discussing compensation and why did you leave your last job? And as Jeff mentioned, when we put together the whole program, Walt and I, there was 13 sessions, about 20 hours worth of material. So we're going to be halfway done. About 2 o'clock today, we'll be halfway done with this whole series. Now, all the previous, all 13 of these are available that we presented in January, February, and March. Same topic, same content, same order. And so if you want to look at these in any order you prefer, you can go back and find those on the Career USA YouTube channel. We spent a lot of time when we first did this to present these in the order 1 through 13 that we thought were most helpful and most important. But now that we have recordings, you can jump around. There are some connections between them, and I think in most cases we refer to where you will find additional information if we're introducing a topic that's not covered in that presentation. But that's 13 topics, and that takes about 3 months to do, and then there'll be some special speakers, and then we'll start over again. So if you look at this, if you want some structure here, the first 5 are about preparing to interview. So that's how important it is. 5 out of the 13 are just on preparation. We're in the second group of 5 now, which is effective interviewing and asking questions and building rapport, showing interest and enthusiasm. We're all coming up as part of effective interviewing. And then the last 3 are some advanced topics, target companies, and difficult questions and difficult interviewers, how to deal with those situations. So, every one of these sessions is very helpful in helping you to be a better interviewer. So today's topic is discussing compensation and why did you leave your last job? And so let's put this into context, because last week we talked about openings and closings and follow-up, okay? And there's, we kind of split the sessions. There's 4 key questions that you need to answer, be prepared to answer for any interview. Okay, why are you here? Which is, we covered last week, and tell me about yourself. So the why are you here is, why are you motivated to come to work for this job, for this company, and now? So you want to answer that in your opening. And then most of the time, like 2/3 of the time, maybe 70% of the time, you're going to get a chance to make an opening statement, which is the tell me about yourself. So that's also part of your opening. So those 2 are addressed in your opening. Today, the other key 2 key questions out of the 4 is, what are your salary requirements and why did you leave your last position? Or if you're currently employed, why are you considering leaving your current position? So these questions you will likely be asked. They may not all occur in the first interview or the screening interview, but they will all be important at some point in your interview process. So let's dig into number 3 and number 4. And we're going to kind of split this up. I'm going to cover compensation. I just have 3 slides, I think 3 or 4 slides on compensation. And then Walt's going to cover compensation and why did you leave your last job? And then I'll come back on and give my perspective on why did you leave your last position. So that's the way it'll be worked out today. Now, me and Jay Fusaro, I think, are the only 2 people I know who believe what I'm about to tell you. So I'm of the belief that when you're unemployed, and most of you are, I believe, that when you're asked what your salary requirements are, that you go ahead and answer the question. But you keep in mind that there is an aspect of negotiation involved. Okay, so I'm going to take you through what I suggest you do. I think almost everybody else you talk to, and Walt's going to give his perspective, is going to say you're going to try to defer that question till later on. Okay. But my perspective is, and it's just what someone said, I used to make a lot of money and this job does not make a lot of money. I used to have a lot of responsibility, and this job does not have a lot of responsibility. If you're out of work, I think you should indicate that you understand what the market requirements are and voice those whenever you're asked. Okay, and we're going to talk about how to do that. But that's just my kind of perspective on it. You may be asked, what are your salary requirements? Because they're thinking, this person's overqualified. This person's had 150K salary, and now this job pays 100K. So they right away, they want to know, what are your salary requirements? And then they're still going to be curious about your motivation, but the salary question is one way to call out people that they believe might expect to be paid more than they can pay. So wouldn't it just be great to deal with that? If it comes up early in the process, deal with it when it comes up. Okay, now I'm going to recommend that at least by the third engagement, you have broached the question if it hasn't already been broached by the recruiter or by the company. So yeah, this is my perspective. If you're unemployed, have an answer for that question and provide the answer. Now, I got this from Jay Fusaro. He speaks pretty regularly, speaks for Jeff's meetings. I don't know, Jeff may mention here when the next time he's going to speak. He's got a book out. He used to be a C-level accountant and is now a career coach. And so this is from him. And when I heard him speak 5 or 6 years ago, this really resonated with me. And so you get asked, what are your salary expectations? And you say, for the responsibilities of this position, I would expect. Okay. Now, there's one little diversion here. You're not answering what your salary expectations are. You're answering what you expect a job like this would pay. Okay. So you don't need to personalize it so much. You don't need to make it a personal struggle that you need, a certain amount of money. You just go and do your research, and then you tell them the answer. For the responsibilities of this position, and you can use other words, based on my research for project managers with 5 years of experience, this is what I would expect, okay? And then you want to give a range, okay? And then you want to ask what their budget is for this position, or what is the salary range for the grade of this position. And every large company will have a salary structure and a grade structure. It's a very important part of their corporate governance to make sure different jobs that have similar responsibility are paid similarly. And so there's not any discrimination built into their pay structure. So they have this information, whether they choose to share it or not, they may or may not, okay? And we'll come back to that question. Somebody asked that question. But you give the range, you ask what budget for the position is, or what the range for the salary grade is. And then, you move on. You've answered the question. Now, you got to remember that you are starting to negotiate, even if it's very early in the process. Okay. And let me just do an aside here. If you get one of these people who call you, one of these recruiters who calls you, and the second question they ask is, what are your salary requirements? I think it's legitimate to say, well, can you tell me a little bit more about the job so I can understand what the responsibilities are, at least what the title is and what the tenure is expected to be, the minimum number. And then, if if you haven't had time to do any research, you should say, and this is where I would say defer. You can say, well, as soon as this call is over, I'm gonna do a little bit of research and I'll call you back and I'll tell you what the range is, okay? Again, it's going to be based on what's available in the market. Okay, but there is a component now, back to where my train of thought, there is a component of negotiation here. So you want to provide a pretty wide range, because when this comes up early in the process, it's a knockout question, right? If you're expecting more than they had in mind, then there's no need pursuing the engagement anymore. And so this is why you need to do your research as well, so you know that the range is acceptable to you. And then you're going to go to, I recommend here, I think in another slide or another click. Yeah, I like bls.gov, www.bls.gov, because it's broken down by economic area. So Dallas-Fort Worth is an economic area. It gives a range of salaries, like 10% to the 90th percentile in 3 steps, I think 3 or 4 steps. And it also will tell you how many people in that economic area have that title. So you might be looking at senior project manager, and it'll tell you how many people in Dallas-Fort Worth area have that title. And all of that information is provided by the company. So none of that is self-reported. So that's why I like BLS.gov. Walt will give you some other options as well. So you go to BLS.gov and you find out that the average for that position, the position that you're considering is 100,000, let's say. So you're going to give it a range now of -10% to +15%. So that's a 25% range. Okay, so you're going to say maybe 90 to 115. Now you're going to loosen it up even a little more than this, because you want to cast a pretty broad net, and you don't want to be eliminated because you came in too high. So you might say, you might put a range on a range. And I learned this from Rex Sowett, another recruiter. And this was his suggestion. I think it's a really good suggestion. So he suggested the -10 to the +15%. And then you put a range on a range. So instead of saying, you know, the mean was 100K, so that's 90 to 115, you might say mid-80s to high, you know, 110s or something like that. So that's very nebulous now, but it's still answering the question, and it's still providing a range. Okay. Now you may want to include, again, because you could be negotiating, you may want to include why you would fall at the high end of that range if you have some reasonable reasons to suspect that. And also, you know, that -10% number should in no case be less than you can afford. Okay, because you may get an offer at that number, and they may say, well, you know, you indicated that was inside your range. So now negotiating is a different topic. I don't think we're going to talk too much about negotiating when you do get the offer. The offer comes, you know, at the end of the process, but during the process, you start with the range, and it's a pretty wide range, but there's some science behind how you select that number. So there's some rationale. And if they want to understand your rationale, you can say, well, I went to BLS.gov and this was the range for this economic area and the years of experience that you indicated. Now, you may miss their range, and you may be too high. And so once they tell you what their range is, my experience has been, you know, that usually you're going to, you know, after you do that expansion, if you give that range, you're probably going to fall in the category. I've had one recruiter tell me one time, yeah, you can go even higher if you have, you know, the necessary certification. So they were trying to encourage me to expand it at the top end. But if you miss the range, you know, it's not a big deal early in the process. You can just say, you know, that's fine. We can still continue the discussion. I'm still interested. Salary is only one of the things that is important to me. Now, that begs the question, what are the other things that are important to you? So you need to have an answer to that question. It might be culture, it might be impact, you know, it might be flexible work hours, it might be something that you know about the company in particular that would be interesting to you and why you might accept the low end of the range. But, you know, just say that's fine. You don't want to, your goal here is to get an offer for employment. So I think I've already said this. If you're asked early in the process, it's a calling question. If it's asked later in the process, it's an indication of interest. So they're starting now to become interested in what you have to offer. And so now they're trying to figure out how affordable you might be. And so now I would say, see if this slide says it. Yeah, your range will narrow. So we've got 25% range with a little buffer on each end. And as you go through the process, you can start narrowing that down. So what they need, how good a fit you are, how good a cultural fit you are, what the responsibilities actually are. You know, they may have really dug themselves a hole, and you have some skills, you know, unique skills that are only one of a few people who are going to be able to solve that problem. And then you can press for the higher end of the range. You may find out that they have a very flexible culture. You can work from home, you know, 3 days out of the week. maybe they work 4 10-hour days, and so you always get a 3-day weekend. So there are cases where you would take less than market for other benefits associated with the job. So as you learn that, your range needs to tighten up. So if they may, different people, the hiring manager, the recruiter may start kind of querying you about what your salary requirements are as they get closer to the end. And so you can start narrowing down your range and coming up with a number that's going to be acceptable to you and to them. Now, sometimes, and this has happened a couple of times in the PIC group, people have gone all the way through to the end of the process only to discover that they had a big disconnect between what the company was going to be able to offer and what they were expecting. So by the third significant meeting, and this was also Rex Salad, which is the first person I've really heard voice this concept, but I think it's a good concept. If by the third significant meeting with them, so the third round of interviews, for instance, if the topic hasn't been broached on salary, then you need to broach it. Okay, you might ask them, I'm just curious to know what the salary range for this position is, okay, because you want to go, 7, 8 rounds and then find out that you guys are off by, $50,000 or something that's just totally unacceptable to you. So it becomes your responsibility, if they haven't brought it up by the third significant meeting, to raise the topic and find out if you guys are on the same page. And what were you making in your last position? So this is another question, and the way I would answer that question is the same way I answer the salary question. For the responsibilities of this position, this is what I would expect, okay? What you made in your last position is not germane. It's a screening question, right? Now, there may be some innocent motivation for this, right? So if they're hiring a director and you've never made director money, then that would be an indication that you have never really been a director. So it's trying to uncover maybe where if you've actually done the job. But I think most of the time, this is another way to figure out if you were much more highly paid before, and this is going to be a much lower position, and therefore you're overqualified. Okay, not an acceptable candidate. So I would try to avoid answering that question really, and answer the question, but I understand what the market bears for this role. I tacitly accept that. Here's the range, here's the answer, and give them a range. And you will, have to put down on your application what your previous salary was, but no need getting screened out by this question when it's may not necessarily be germane. I mean, if you need a big salary, then you should be interviewing for big salary jobs. And if you can accept a lower salary, then tell them what that salary is that you're willing to accept, able to work with. The real focus is on how you can help them. And more negotiation comes later on in the process after they've made you an offer.
Well, Mark, and my purpose today is to have you prepared so that you can walk into an interview and say, go ahead, ask me the salary question. I'm ready. I'm okay. So that is what we're going to try to do. So we're just talking about money. Well, that's not enough money. That's not enough money. All right, now we're talking about money. So here's my question to you. What are we thinking in an interview? Are we thinking like a job seeker, or are we thinking like a professional in our chosen field? That's quite a bit different. The first one is like I'm a candidate, and often I am an underling. It's not even here. They're in charge, they're in control, and that's okay. There's things that we can do to help redirect or change the agenda and do it appropriately, so that we're making sure that we like this place and they like to hire us as well. But if we're going in there and saying, I'm a professional, I do these things. So that's my first tip to you. Projecting a level of confidence, you're dealing with somebody, who knows who we are. I'm going to tell you who I am. I'm going to tell you what I can do, what I have done in the past, and I'm going to tell you how I can help you. And that's going to be the focus of the interview. So here's a couple of places on market research. Be prepared. I heartily agree with Mark on the BLS page. It's an excellent page for salary information. Salary.com is another one. Both of these are free sites, and it's company provided data. so that you can get some research. And of course, LinkedIn, Indeed, and Glassdoor and everything have generally candidate provided, self-provided numbers, which are not really, you know, I wouldn't go up to an HR person and say, well, Indeed says the average salary is this, because you don't know what's the valid number from a self-reported amount. And then, of course, recruiters have some salary ranges. You can ask them to get some information. There are organizations professionally that have that kind of information as well. So there's other places you can get ranges to do your homework. Basic thing is this type of job in this industry and in this location. Those are the three parameters. You're very well aware that if you're going to go to work in California, you can't make enough money in California with the same salary you got here. So there's adjustments that has to be made. Nonetheless, do your homework first so that you know what the market really pays. That stops you from having to say, well, I'm just looking for something for the market range, and I'm sure we can come to a fair and equitable decision and blah, 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 blah. I suggest that's not the approach we want to take. So based on the market research that I've done, and then you could come back and say, and this is what the range, based on the responsibilities of the job. Like Mark was saying, typical questions: what do you require, what are you making, and what's your minimum? So 3 different questions and a little bit different approach to each one of those things. Where are we in the process and who's asking? That is the major factor in figuring out what we're going to respond with. Early in the process has one approach, and later in the process can be, oh, well, are we ready to negotiate a deal? All right, and you may be at that point, and that would be your response because you've talked about everything else but salary, and now it's time to talk about it. So it really depends on where you are in the process. Why do they ask compensation? I mean, what is it about compensation that's so dadgum important that they got to want to know right up front? It's Mark calls it culling, and I call it a knockout question. If you don't have this, if your last job doesn't same with this job, then we who are so validly knowledgeable about numbers and monies, we determine that if you can't make your last salary, that won't fit, you won't be happy. When we are saying, hey, that's up for us to decide that, right? It's our decision, not yours. So we got to try to figure out how we can work that so that we can say, oh, let's see if we can't move forward here. The primary thing we want to do with salary questions until the end of the process is move on in the process. Now, here's the criteria. Is it a company you really want to work for, and is it a job you really want to do? So we can kind of agree and make some statements and do some things to just keep the process going so that it's not a knockout question. So what were you making in your last position? Now, that's getting to be in some states an illegal question. I don't really worry about illegal questions because people ask them all the time. You don't want to say something to correct them at the time of the interview, and you can correct them when you get hired, right? But the strategy and the approach is not fair to compare. So you don't tell those words. You don't say, well, it's not fair to compare. I mean, you're telling them they shouldn't be asking this question, and they're wrong. You can say, well, that last job had a different responsibility level, authority level, different types of expectations than this job. All right. So I'm going to give you a reason that I really don't want to answer the question, not just not answer it. All right. I'll give them a reason why and say, but I am interested. What is your range? Or what do you have budgeted? Okay. What's your market range? So that whatever we answer, we can always come back and ask them the question right back to them. So that's our last position answer. What do you require? So repelling and nailing and responding and nailing. I got this from John McDormand years ago as an idea of how we might respond or repel. We have options, all right? Mark has a great option. He says, I just as soon go ahead and get the number done and just get it out of the way and go forward. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that, okay? But we can make a decision. Ideally, it would be great if we could make that decision at the end of the process, and we talk about salary at the end. Get them to the point where we know that they want us. What is the leverage we now have to negotiate a salary and to talk about it? Well, how often does that happen? Not very much. So you got a question, you can respond and nail, or you can repel and nail. Repelling is given a reason not to answer. It's very similar to what Mark was saying. We start out with salary may not be the most important thing to me. The job in the company are the top two factors. Everything's looking good so far. I can give that as reason, but I am interested. What is your range? Or I could say, would it be all right with you? Okay, I ask permission to change his agenda or her agenda. Say, would it be all right with you if we spend some more time understanding about the role, the job, the expectations that I have in this role? But I am interested. What is your range? All right. So if you give them kind of a reason, and that's called repelling. I'll always come back with either one. If you give the range, fine. I hardly also agree with Mark that early on is a little bit wider range, but you ought to know that range so you don't undersell yourself and you don't oversell yourself, somewhere in that. And once a number or range is mentioned, you have begun negotiation. Now, that's necessarily not a bad thing, but just know that negotiations have begun. You can also say, in answering these questions, if you want to give a response, I like Jay Pizarro's and Mark's option on based on the response to the job I would expect. I also like a response that says, well, based upon what I know now, all right, because I don't know how much I know in this process. I mean, if it's early on in the process and I don't know very much, I say based on what I know now, I would think then you can use Jay Pizarro's and Mark's expression on the responsibility of the job I would expect, all right? You can say that. But when you say based on what I know now, that gives you the right to change it later, depending on what you learn as you go through the process. So responding and nailing and repelling and nailing. Either way, make your decision. If you can try to delay it till later and keep the process going, that would be good. But at some point in time, you're gonna have to give a number. The minimum salary. Basically, the process for that is really, I don't know. I mean, now, actually, I think you ought to have a minimum salary in mind. You say, you know, I'm not going to go to work and it costs me $300 a week or $300 a month or whatever it is to work here, right? So you really need to have a good idea of that. I know that sometimes you need money, and the pressure of a job says, I'll take a lower job. I'll take a cut in salary. I mean, I'll do it. I got to get a job, this kind of thing. And so if that's your mindset, that's going to be tough. But if your mindset is, oh, that job is a stepping stone to a better job, I'm going to give it at 100%. I'm eager to get started. I really love the company. I can do this job. I'll be glad to do it. I'm motivated to do it. Then that's a better deal for you. If you've got that mindset, great. But if you've got the one that says, I just got to take it. I know one person who says, well, I can do this job, and it's really not the salary I want, but it's kind of getting late. So she took the job, and 3 months later, she said, I can't do it, and quit and found her much better job. So that's the point of trying to make sure that we are not subservient, but we will want to follow their agenda. And when it's appropriate to give a number, have your prepared number. And if you want to delay, give some reason for delay. Let's talk just a hair about negotiation. We really want to win-win. Companies can ask salary ranges, and we really would like them to be happy in paying our salary. We don't really want to have them feel like we put them over a barrel. They got to have somebody, and we're going to get a premium price for that. And nor do we want to feel like we're not getting a fair deal either. So what the main thing is work ahead of time to prepare to evaluate your offer. Don't wait until an offer when you get it. Know what you want. What kind of benefits are important to you? What kind of dollar value? Can you trade time off for salary? What is it that's important, and prioritize those things. The interview process sometimes goes weeks and months, and then they give you 2 days or 1 day to respond to an offer. So in that point in time, understand those things. But then you can ask them, well, how much time do I have to respond? Sometimes they'll say, well, we'll give you a day. Well, you can always negotiate that. Well, can I have a couple of days? Get at least 1 or 2 days more, perhaps. And simply asking, is there room for negotiation? Now, that's a good question for recruiters and hiring managers, because sometimes the answer goes from one extreme to the other. One is, no, it's a BAFO. It's the best and final offer. it's the best we can do, take it or leave it type situation, all the way to, oh yeah, we expect you to negotiate. We expect to get another alternative from you to respond. So sometimes it's just simply enough to ask. It doesn't hurt you to ask, right? So prioritize your package. Here's a whole bunch of things that you can look at and say, what's important to me? And I'll put this in the chat window in a little bit for the end of the day. It's a little Excel spreadsheet. It's an offer evaluation template. It's got some way to monetize some of the benefits that you get. There's some cells in there that are calculations are already included and that sort of thing. You can play with it. If you love Excel, you might enjoy this. If you're not an Excel person, don't even open it. All right. Remember this. Job applications are legal documents. Not the same thing as a resume. That's not a legal document, but a job application is. So do any of you have wonderings about how do I answer salary questions in the application? Well, I'm going to help you out. You got some options here. So you can play a game with them. You can just say, oh, they forced me to put in a number, so I'm just going to put in a number. All right. The second thing you can do is enter an actual amount. Now, the question might be what are your requirements or what you were making, right? So you can figure out, well, do I want to enter an amount? Do I not want to enter an amount in that? But you can enter the actual amount. And option 3 is to enter a targeted salary. But in the comment box, put in this sentence: all salary figures reported in this application reflect my current salary target. Okay. That gets you out of legal problems if you put in a salary and then they go back and they should find out what your salary was and it's different than what you said and you lied on your application and you've gone history, that sort of thing. So just if you want to put a number in there, go ahead and state that. Then they know that you're looking at this current salary target, not your past particular history. Now think about the message we send with these options. I kind of mentioned we're going to play a game. This is some of the fun part of interviewing is the salary negotiation. And now if you heard the phrase, he who mentions numbers first loses. So I've asked people, what do we lose? And there's this long pause. Well, what we lose is leverage, right? Leverage. Because you've begun the negotiations, which can be fine if it's time to do that. But you've got to understand that my rule of ranges goes like one party's thinking of the low number and the other party's thinking of the high number, all right? So when you have this A to Z range, the thoughts can be, well, I can get this person for A. And so that might be the offer. Or maybe both people are kind of thinking in the mid-range area. But based on how you can sell yourself, on who you are, what you can do, and how you can help them and show the value to them may raise that number to something. And the more they want you, you can raise that number. Now, if it's a job that is you're getting, and it is less of a role, it is less salary than you've made in the past. And some people are concerned about that. Well, all we have to do really is convince them that this is the job we want. This is what I want to do. I'm happy doing this job. I'm energized by it. This is the company where I want to do it. Mark mentioned, you got to be able to answer the question, why do you want to work here? And that's 2 parts, this job and this company. And if that's what you want, then you're saying, I'm willing to take a lower number by convincing them that that's the job. You understand, yes, I've done a lot of different things in the past, but this is the thing that I really want to do today. So that you can then move forward with, all right, that salary is fine with me. So that concern of, gee, you're not making the same as you were, and you're making a less amount here. I'm going to try to, by authentically explaining to them that this is okay with me. And here's why. I love this kind of job. I want to do. A lot of people have been in executive roles, and now they're, want to say, well, I really want to prefer doing this. I enjoy that part of it more than the rest of it. I know it's a lower salary, but that's fine with me. I would love to do that kind of job at that salary. Why did you leave your last job? Well, I went to work one day and they moved and they never told me. No, that wasn't a good reason. So why do interviewers want to know why we left or leaving? So let's kind of look at the motive behind the question. Every question has a motive. Why this question? Why now in this part of the process? And why from this person? 3 parameters. Say, how do I answer a question with knowledge of those 3 things? Is going to help us with that. So did we leave for a good reason? Did we leave voluntarily? Did we leave on good terms? Were we in jail? I mean, sometimes there's gaps in the process. And so every job you've had, we want to have the answer to why we left that job. They may ask for every one of them, right? So what were the reasons? I recommend a short answer as possible. Now, if you've got a difficult answer to that, and Mark's going to go into more details with this, the answer to you, I would tell you, is get a coach to help you. Mark's very good at that. I can help you with that. He's got some good information that'll help you when you have, say, gee, I can't really explain. We don't want to be negative, like the CEO that was telling people, you know, he fired some people and other people left. And so we want to go in there and say, well, we had a nutty CEO that was firing people and other people didn't like him and they left. And that's why I left my last job. How do we rephrase that? We could come back to saying something like, you know, the situation changed, the environment changed, the objectives and the job changed. And so it just became not a fit for me. And that's why I'm here with you today. If you run into why I want to work this job, and why I want to work this company. Red flags. If we respond something with performance, behavior, discontent, and focusing on us, that's a negative. But green flags are, I learned a lot. The positivity was a good place to work. I had several achievements. Mark has mentioned, bring up your achievements. Focus on your target company. Focus on that, not focus on us. So it's the positive things. So what actually happened? Did we leave? And many times when I'm coaching people on why they left, they say, well, tell me the truth. Tell me the whole truth. Lay it all out in front of me. You say, okay, now we are not going to tell them that. So what are we going to tell them? And how can we talk about that? Mark's got a great process on going through that. So we're making enough money. We hated a commute. We didn't get along with the boss. We were sick. We were laid off. We're fired. Well, we can't say that. That's not going to help us get the job. I mean, laid off may be true, but it also, did you get fired and you're laid off? I mean, what does laid off really mean? I mean, downsizing is downsizing. That's a better term, right sizing. Merger, acquisition. People understand what those things are. Sometimes that's all you have to say. So the guidelines are not fleeing from a bad opportunity. Nothing negative about your job, company, or your boss, all right? Even though that can be the primary reason, we don't want to say, I'm leaving. Now, I was talking to a person the other day, and she's looking for a different job. And I said, well, what's going on? And she said, well, there's a couple of people that are just out to get me in this organization. They're accusing me of doing things that I'm not doing. They say I'm bullying them. They're reporting things to HR that aren't true and that kind of stuff. And that's why I want to leave. I said, well, we certainly can't say that, but you can say the environment changed, the culture changed, the purposes and objectives of whatever it might be changed. But if we say, oh, we had some bad employees, they were really treating me incorrectly and improperly, and I had to report them to HR, et cetera, that stuff was not going to do that. But I'm not fleeing, I'm moving towards something. So what are the new challenges? What are the new experiences? This is my dream job. I love taking on additional responsibilities, and I love a different work environment. Not a better work environment, a different work environment. Answer from their perspective. Now, I say that in every question in an interview. Always look at why they're asking it, what is the reason they're asking it, so that we can answer and satisfy the motive behind the question. So why this job and why this company? Be brief on any negative. Now, downsizing is negative. Reduction in force is negative, but it's not that kind of negative. It's just, hey, this is the fact of life. We were downsized, went through a merger and acquisition. You can mention how many people left. I know that one of Mark's categories is we were downsized and I was the only one that left. And so how do I answer that? But it's the same type of thing in saying that situations change. Most often, it's not your fault that you left a company. Most often it is not. Sometimes we personalize and think there's something I did wrong and don't know what it is, but it's generally not. I haven't met anybody that comes to work saying, I'm going to be a jerk today. I'm going to do a bad job. I'm not going to meet expectations. I'm really going to be lazy, unless they were the boss's son or daughter. Otherwise, everybody else came to work pretty well. Emphasize the positive, the relevant accomplishments. So in that job, I really enjoyed it, had some great people. I was able to achieve these types of things, okay? So when you saying you're left, you're emphasizing the positive, not just necessarily coming up with all the negative stuff. We want to tell the truth. Some people want to be so honest and tell the truth that they won't get hired. They just want to lay it all out there. Well, we don't want to lie. We want to be authentic, we want to be a genuine. And if you've got some gaps, what happens during the gaps? What did you learn? What are you doing? I'm telling you, volunteering is great. What if you're fired? All right. So something's happened. This is very negative. Avoid putting the blame on others, even though it's probably true. I have seen more people leave a company because of leadership, not because of the company. I've seen it not getting along with other people, particularly in the management roles, in the higher management roles, than the company itself. I contend that most people, leave management, leave leadership, not the company most often. What are the lessons learned in a particular incident? One person who had left a person who was asleep in the restroom on an airplane got fired. She wanted to work for another company. Ethical and honesty were amongst their top things. And so she said, I just want to let you know that on one particular occasion, I did not check the restroom, the bathroom on the airplane, and left person in there. But I can tell you this, I'll never do that again. And they actually hired her because of her honesty and her forthrightness and coming out and telling them what the particular reason was and why it happened. So that can be a very positive thing. Stay professional, motivated, and honest. Any extenuating circumstances, I'll let Mark get into this in more detail. Expectations change, new management, budget cutback, strategy shift, etc. Sometimes, I've heard of people that got a job and then they went to work and said, this job isn't what I thought it was going to be and not what we talked about. It's a different job. That can happen. Very brief on why we left. All right. Let them ask for more details if they want to know more information about it. But that brings me to why I'm here with you today. Here's why this job energizes me. It's who I am and what I love to do. 2 reasons on why I want to work here, which is I want to help you achieve these types of things and give some specifics. I always suggest anytime you hear yourself talking in a generality, change it to a specific. I just want to meet the company objectives. All right, well, name 1, name 2. Don't just talk in the generalities. Be specific. It's very, very strong. Okay,
I've got kind of 5 things I want to cover here, and which will dovetail very nicely with what Walt was saying. And so the first thing is some things to consider about corporate restructurings. And until you've seen I talked to a lot of people who've been laid off, and of course I went through 3 layoffs myself. You don't have a broad perspective on how these things work, so I'm going to share some of that with you. Cultivating a positive perspective, Walt's exactly right. You have to be positive all the time about the situation. And so I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. And then my approach to delivering the answer to the question, why did you leave your last job? And then follow-up questions that may come to you, kind of in general, we'll talk about that. And then a few more complicated separation situations. So those 5 topics. And then we'll be done. And we'll answer any questions that come up or questions that we've missed after that. So corporate restructurings, they're almost always, and a corporate restructuring might be a layoff, it might be a reduction in force, it might be a closing of an office, it might be 2 companies coming together, a consolidation, projects are canceled, people are outsourced or jobs are outsourced, and professional employment organization transitions are also kind of used to restructure the workforce. And so that's where everybody, you work for company ABC, and they tell you in a couple of months, we're going to transfer everybody to the professional employment organization, and you're going to work for them doing the same job, and we're hiring them to manage our HR staff. So the PEO organization takes care of all the things they need to take care of, the benefits, the 401k, hirings and firings, and the company can really focus on just doing what they do. But a lot of times those transitions reduce the number of staff that are available. And so the point here is almost all of those restructurings are caused by a need to conserve financial resources, okay? And sometimes it's not even that the company's in trouble. Sometimes they, made some promises that if we're going to merge these two organizations, then we're going to save $2 billion. And guess what? If they don't save $2 billion, then the CEOs, both of them, if they're still there, are out of work. So they're highly motivated to save the money they claim they were going to save. The net of it is, jobs become redundant. People are not as many people are needed to achieve the goal. So this is the major reason, and I would say 95% of the time, I think Walt used that number too, but close to that, it's driven by some financial considerations, and even in smaller companies. Okay, and let's see what else I got here. Yes, a restructuring is often preceded by a change in senior management. So companies not doing so well, they're not public about this. This is not a public thing. It's a very secretive thing. But the CEO gets replaced, and the new CEO's mandate is to get this ship, floating and selling strong. And that means cutting expenses. Okay, so you'll see this all the time, and maybe it's happened to you. The CEO comes in, the new CEO comes in. Now, everybody who was a VP who worked for the old CEO who failed, the old CEO failed, the company is about to sink. All those people are suspect as well. Okay, and so some of them are kept, but a lot of them are replaced. And then it trickles down farther and farther down in the organization, those changes in gender changes and reductions, and people are impacted. So oftentimes, like 95% of the time, that is the root cause of what happened to you. Okay, and it helps to have that perspective, because it truly, it is very rarely something that you did. Now, that doesn't mean that they behave badly and try to make you think that it's something you did, but 95% of the time, it's not you. It's not you. I've coached maybe 300 people, and I can take 3 times, where people really truly made a mistake and were fired for cause. But about another, 25% of them will show up, to my coaching sessions believing that it was their fault, and it absolutely was not. Okay. Some companies are restructuring regularly, and if you're new to that company or new to the industry, you may not know this, but think of Blockbuster video stores. They used to be, almost as ubiquitous as Starbucks is. Now they're all gone, completely gone, and that's because that industry just evaporated over a pretty long time, 5-7 years. It wasn't hard to predict after it got started, but they just shrunk and shrunk and shrunk and shrunk, and finally, shrunk out of existence. And so this happens. This is what happened in my industry. It continues to shrink today. They've been having layoffs for 20 years. It's just fewer and fewer people are necessary to support that industry. So this is maybe the way they're running their business. Now, they can take several years, okay, and that's the other point, is that sometimes people come and they believe that their situation is unique, but I start talking to them, when did they have their last layoff, and what about before that? And so they realize that every 6 months there's been a few people here or there who have been laid off, and it might not be very many, it might be 3 or 4 or 5, but that's just an indication of the financial stress that the company's under. And, you know, it could happen to you. It's not you. It's the situation that the company is in. And they'll try to hide this. They will definitely try to hide this, because a lot of bad things start to happen if they go public with the fact that they're struggling. Okay, their customers may abandon them because they're concerned that they won't be able to get their product. The suppliers will stop supplying them because they're afraid they won't be able to be paid. So they'll kind of start demanding cash up front, you know, for their necessary supplies. And employees who are able to leave will leave if, you know, they say, oh yeah, we're kind of struggling, but we're going to right the ship. Now, public companies, you know, need to be forthright in their financial reporting, but private companies not necessarily. And so they were going to try to hide this as long as they can, because they, you know, they believe that they're going to hire this new CEO, and the new CEO is going to fix things, and so everything will be hunky dory in 6 or months or a year. But oftentimes the decline continues and more people are impacted. It's kind of a slow motion train wreck. Okay, so a lot of comments to help you understand if you're wondering that if you got fired, if you got laid off, that most of the time some financial stress that causes a reduction in staff. I've coached a lot of people who've been mistreated on their way out. Okay, and so, I don't know why this is, but some managers believe that, you know, maybe they'll feel better if they blame the need to let you go on something that you did. And if that's happened to you, let's have a conversation, okay? Because we're going to figure out that it wasn't you at all. It was bad management, and you know, trying to find an easy way when they've been tasked to reduce staff, and let's say they've been told, all the managers have been told, you know, you got to cut your staffing expense. That, you know, they're never told you have to lay off a certain number of people. They say, we got to cut staffing expense by 10%, and so they have to lay off one person. Okay, so that's almost looks like a firing, doesn't it? You know, the one person that they have to pick. But in the context of what's going on in all of the company, you know, there might be 20 or 30 or 40 people leaving, but they'll do some strange things. You know, so here's an example. So they, a manager was called one time. I was called on a Sunday and said, you know, you need to be in New York City for a meeting on Tuesday, and so go ahead and make your travel arrangements and get up there. So when he gets back, he turns in his expense report, and, you know, a few days later he gets called into his manager, to his boss's office with HR there, and he said, you know, you violated our travel expenses by purchasing this very expensive ticket to New York City, so we're letting you go. Okay, well, what do you do when you're told on Sunday to be there on Tuesday? You know, you buy the ticket. And so this was just a cover for financial difficulty they were having and the need to reduce staff in the middle management ranks. And so they just fabricated some, you know, situation to get him out the door. It's just crazy behavior. And you may have experienced that yourself. Let's have a conversation if you have. So here's my advice, that when you think about what happened to you and you want to explain it, that you zoom up to a really high level. You zoom up to the financial reporting level, because some of the individual circumstances around your separation, you know, might have been very hurtful to you, might have left a bad taste in your mouth, and you really need to get past that and look at it in a bigger context. Okay, that'll get you into a more positive state of mind. It might not be truly positive, but a more positive state of mind. And I've recommended to some people that they keep a journal. They keep a journal, you know, of all those things that happened to them and how they felt about them. And then at some point, you just burn that journal. Okay, a cathartic separation from what happened to you in the past, so you can go forward with a positive perspective and see it for what it was. You know, some sort of financial stress. You can be grateful for the time you have now that, you know, you're looking for a job. It's an opportunity to find something more suitable, more impactful, So there are some positives to getting out of an organization. In my industry, when things were really bad in the recession of 2002, we came to understand that being laid off in the first round of layoffs was a good thing, because you got a better severance package than if you were in the second or third or fourth round of layoffs. So by the time it was the fourth round layoffs, it was like, okay, October 1st is your last day of work, and there was no severance. There wasn't any money to provide severance. So, if you've been in that situation, being separated from that, ship that's sinking, can be a benefit, can be a positive thing. Okay, so let's get down to delivering the answer. And this I also believe I got from Jay Fusaro, who says a lot of things that I agree with. So why did you leave your job at ABC Corp? Thank you for asking. I'm grateful for my time at ABC Corporation. I learned a lot and I contributed a lot. That's a key phrase. I learned a lot and I contributed a lot. So ABC needed to reduce staff, and my position was considered redundant, along with, name the number, a number of other staff in the Dallas location. And then you want to transition to something that's positive about your experience there at ABC Corp, right? So I'm most proud of the time that I saved them a bunch of money by doing something very brief, okay? So here, let's break this down a little bit. So I'm grateful for my time and I learned a lot and I contributed a lot, okay? What you're saying is it was a productive time in my career, and now I'm moving forward to my next opportunity. So this is the attitude you want to purvey. And I have another slide here where I talk about things you don't do, but let me just mention this one now. You don't need to heap a lot of praise on your previous employer, okay? It serves no purpose, but just to say how great that company was, and maybe indicate that you have some regret about what happened. And certainly you may wish you were still there, but it's not. I mean, you need to be thinking about how you're going to go forward. So I learned a lot and I contributed a lot, and then you finish with something that you achieved while you were there, a very positive thing. So you're trying, and this whole strategy that I espouse here is getting an opportunity to talk about a success or a way you can help your new company. So every time they ask you about one of your previous jobs, you're going to offer up the results of a positive story about something you contributed or something you learned or some expertise you developed at that company. So every comment that you're asked about previous work, you end with a positive comment about somehow how you contributed to the success of that company, and therefore, by implication, could contribute to success of the company you're interviewing for. So the second part of this, ABC Corp needed to reduce staff. So this is where you switch positions and you use their perspective. You're empathetic to the company's position. You realize that they had some financial difficulty. You may not know the details, but you're accepting of the fact that they had some financial difficulty. They needed to save money. They needed to reduce staff, and you and a few others were effective, but you don't have any, ill will towards them. It was something they needed to do, and that's a positive side, and employers will appreciate this, right? Because I laid off a lot of people, and the 3 times I was laid off, 2 of those 3 times I laid off my entire team. I mean, my entire department was considered redundant, and it was true. It was necessary. We were working on advanced things, and in the heat of the moment when nobody was buying anything, you certainly didn't need the advanced product that I was working on. So me and my entire team of about 50 people went out the door. But it was it was something the company needed to do. It was going to sink the ship if they didn't reduce staff. So take that perspective. Okay, companies will appreciate that. And then the third part of it is I am most proud of and a result from a success story. So it can be just as short and sweet as that, and you're moving on. But Oh, I got a little bit ahead. Before I say that, let's talk about some don'ts. Don't use negative words, even unfortunately. Okay, unfortunately, I got laid off. Okay, or, unfortunately, I was considered redundant. Well, I'm the hiring manager. I don't consider that unfortunate. If you got some skills I need, then, that's a pretty fortunate thing that you got laid off. That means, you might get to come to work here and solve my problems. Okay. It was not for me. It was a toxic environment. The company struggled. So don't use any of those words. Okay. Not even marginally negative words. It's all positive all the time. Don't elaborate in any way. Okay. The reason for the separation should be exceedingly brief. And this includes don't heap praise on the previous organization. That's just not necessary. Okay. You no longer work there. You learned a lot. You contributed a lot. They treated you well. That's about all you need to say. And then you state the reason, and then you transition to a positive story. Don't betray your old company's challenges in some other part of the interview. So we had a candidate one time, we asked him what he was looking for in his new job, and he said a supportive management story. Well, there you go. We went down a rabbit trail for about 10 minutes about, what did he mean by supportive management, which was ultimately the reason he left, because management wasn't supporting him. Your separation and the rest of your interview, your separation story and the rest of your interview need to be consistent. Okay, now, so what I started to say was, after you deliver your message that you learned a lot and you contributed a lot and they needed to reduce staff, and then you had a great achievement that you wanted to share with them, they may still be curious. They may still continue to ask you questions about that. And especially HR people are going to be curious about the circumstances of your departure. So they may ask you follow-on questions. They may say something very open-ended, like, well, tell me some more about, the reduction in force, or, why you had to leave. And so the second response, if you get another open-ended question, is to provide some additional details about how many people were laid off and where they might have come from. And if you don't know the details, you don't have to say the details, but you can say, I know 2 people in accounting, and I know a couple of engineers, and and some others I'm not so sure about, but I know several people were laid off. And then you may also want to add, I got a severance or a salary continuation package and benefits provided. They treated me well, and then offer another achievement. Okay. So results first, right? Offer another result. And this is not any kind of subterfuge here. I mean, you're being very open. You're trying to get to the point where you're trying to get past this so you can talk about how you can help them. So start offering up those stories, those positive stories about how you can help them to encourage them to move on. No need to spend a lot of time covering this. It's really very straightforward and simple. They may continue to ask. And so I coach people when we have our conversations, be prepared for 3 open-ended questions. Okay, the initial question, why did you leave your last position? And then tell me more. And then what else can you add? What else do you want to tell me? And so the third response is what they're doing without you. Okay, what they're doing without you and the other people who are laid off. So they may still be continuing to lay off people. They may be doing well. The reports are that they're going to recover. They may have successfully moved all the staff to India, just whatever it is, put a bow around it. It says you stayed in contact, you were committed to the organization and you're still aware of what's going on. You have no bitterness, this is a fact, but it ends the story. It ends the story. And if they continue to ask, you can just repeat different parts of the story about the details and the current situation. This is the whole story, those 3 parts, the whole story and nothing but the story. 90% of the time, that first answer is going to be plenty. Okay, and you're going to offer a success story, and then you're going to be on talking about how else you can help out the company. Some interviewers will ask you about every position that's on your resume, and they'll want a very brief answer. So you don't have to go through this long process. You can just say, I left for a better opportunity. I was hired, I was recruited away by a previous boss, whatever it was, the reason was a layoff. Some people have had the unfortunate circumstance to have been laid off several different times, but during 2008 to about 2015, 7-year period, it was pretty dicey economy, and that happened. A lot of people would get a job, and that company would get in trouble, and they'd go on to the next one, and the same thing would happen over and over. Financial stress. The whole country was under financial stress. Okay, common follow-up questions. Did you receive a severance package? So you don't usually receive a severance package if you were fired for cause. So if you received a severance package, but you believe you were fired, no, you weren't. Okay, you received a severance package. If you're fired for cause, you don't get a severance package. You also aren't eligible for unemployment. Okay, they will challenge your unemployment. They don't want to play unemployment if you don't deserve unemployment. So if you're receiving unemployment, and I've had some people who were maybe kind of sort of fired. They were asked to leave. Let's say that they were no longer a fit, but they were the only one. But the company made it clear to them when they delivered this news that they were going to be eligible for unemployment, and they were going to receive a severance package. So indeed, if you get that kind of feedback, you were not, fired for cause. Okay, it may have only been a layoff of one, and for a small organization, a layoff of one can be, a help. But if you receive severance and unemployment, it was a reduction in force. Some interviewers will ask how you felt about being laid off. Did that make you angry? Were you sad? Were you upset? And you want to be positive all the time. Yeah, it was. You might say, yeah, for a little bit, for a couple of days, but then I realized the opportunity at hand, and so now we're having this conversation. If you had the opportunity, would you return to work for your previous employer? So this is why there's no need to heap praise on your previous employer, because you're not going back. You're going forward. You're there to tell them, to explain to them how you can be of help to them. You're interested, you're motivated, you're enthusiastic about what's to come in the future. You're not going back. Okay, you're just not. That's the way you answer that question. And some people they may ask you this difficult question, and then they don't say anything. They're just waiting for you to say more. So be prepared, give your brief answer. If there's an awkward pause, ask them, did I answer your question? Or do you have another question for me? Now you're going to do your transition, right? So you're going to tell at the very end of your answer, you're going to say, I'm most proud of the time that I did X, Y, and Z. So if you get that pause, you can say, well, would you like to hear more about that? That thing I did that I just mentioned, and start telling them that story. Okay, I highly recommend a career coach if you don't have anything but the basic issue. If you were laid off with a bunch of other people, or your location was closed, or a lot of people, your function was outsourced to another country or something like that. That's a pretty common thing. You can say that, and everybody will understand that. But if you left voluntarily without another job, you're probably going to need a coach to help explain that. If you were indeed fired for cause, if you made a mistake, Walt covered it briefly, but get a coach. If there was a restructuring of one person, get a coach. They can help you. There's just a lot of aspects of this that you need to cover, and you need to get your head right as well. If you had an extended illness, or you had to take time off to care for a family member, it's a good conversation to have with a coach. And if you had a series of short-term engagements, same kind of deal. Coach can help you bring bigger perspective to that. So the coach is involved with the pit crew, or Walt and Carol Brickell and Jack Beck, and so all of them are eminently qualified to answer this question. And I also coach, and this is the only thing I coach on, so you can reach out to me as well. That's it. Should you practice? I think the answer is yes. Go to Walt's class, reach out to the pit crew. I don't think I mentioned, but I'll mention it now. You do not have to have an opportunity at hand, a recruiter calling you to practice with the practice interview team. Find a resume that looks good to you, your dream job, for instance, and just send that in and come and practice. The more you practice, the better you will be, the shorter your job search will last, the quicker you'll be back to work. So come and practice. The PIC crew is always open.
All right, so that is our, that's the lesson for the day. If you have any questions, you're welcome to unmute your mic and ask away, and we'll be glad to get those questions answered for you. So if you'd like to, if anybody has any questions, please let me know what they are. Any questions, anybody? Jennifer asked on Facebook, are there any fees for coaching with PIC crew or others? The PIC crew is free. Mark McDonald is free. Walt Glass is free. I know that if you, I believe Jack Bick and Carol Buckel may cost you, but they don't charge a lot of money. And if you don't have anything, they may just help you out for free. But you know, Mark and Walt both help people. I mean, that's what we're here to do. Any other questions from anybody? I did put in the chat box, I put the offer evaluation template that Walt talked about at the very beginning. So you can download that if you're an Excel guru. For those watching on Facebook, if you want to send me an email at interviewing@careerdfw.org, interviewing@careerdfw.org, I'll be glad to send you that handout or that Excel spreadsheet that talks about how to, how to evaluate the offer presentation. Anybody else? Anybody else have any questions? Going once, going twice? All right, well, just as a reminder, Career DFW and Career USA, we're putting on training 4 days a week. Today is our Wednesday presentation. Hopefully you'll join us for other things. Tomorrow is the third Thursday of the month, so we'll be talking about resumes. Carol Burkell will be along. She's a certified professional career coach. She'll talk about her favorite resume tips. So that'll be tomorrow at 1 o'clock. And then on Friday at the North Dallas Plano Career Focus Group meeting, fireproofing your career, how to make sure that when you do land your next job that you don't sabotage yourself. So fireproofing your career with Pete Havel this Friday at 9:30. Next Tuesday for LinkedIn Tuesdays, Ruth Lipsky will be with us to talk about LinkedIn search engine optimization. Always an interesting and fascinating presentation. Ruth works for Lee Heck Harrison, and she teaches a lot of the people there how to use LinkedIn effectively. Next Wednesday, we'll be on session number 8, how to ask questions during the interview. Asking questions are very, very important, so it's a great opportunity to learn how to do that. Then next Thursday, for Networking Thursdays, it'll be the 4th Thursday of the month. We'll talk about taking the chill out of cold calls. And this will be with Bob Maher. He's a certified coach. So if you're interested, join us next Thursday at 1 o'clock. This session has been recorded. It will be on the Career DFW Facebook page and the Career USA YouTube channel. On the Career USA YouTube channel, be sure to click on playlist, and then down below, don't click on the video, but click down where you see view full playlist. And then up will come a list of all the different topics and titles in that particular playlist. The newest one should be on top, and you can scroll down. We've got over 250 or 260 different videos that have been posted, and you're welcome to go back. You can watch any of them at any time at your convenience. If you're not receiving emails about our workshops and you'd like to join the Career USA mailing list, please send an email to Career USA, the +subscribe@groups.io. If you do subscribe to our list, if you're not getting emails from us, by doing so, you'll get 6 emails a week. The first email is the career tip of the week on Sunday. And then Monday, you'll get an email with all the upcoming topics for that Tuesday through Friday. And then every day you will get an email with that day's topic, title, and Zoom link. So you don't have to go look for the Zoom link to join us. We're always going to be on the Career DFW Facebook page. So you can always do that. If you're following us on Career DFW on the Facebook page, just click on follow. And every time we go live, you should get a little buzz on your phone saying we're now live. Please remember, Career DFW, we're a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We have no full or part-time employees. Everything I've done over the last 13 years has been as a volunteer. We're just here to help you. We survive on donations. All of our speakers are volunteers. Please consider making a donation when you get your next job. So thank you for joining us today. We hope to see you later in the week.